Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the third and final module of what has been a great week of the Carer Knowledge Exchange inaugural Research Incubator event, Connecting Research to Practice. My name's Elena Katrakis. I'm the CEO at Carers New South Wales, and my co-chair today is Carol Mills, who's the Director at the Institute for Public Policy and Government Governance at UTS. And so we'll be sharing the chairing today in the spirit of partnership, which is what this project is all about. So just to start off with the usual kind of briefing, noting that this session will be recorded, and we ask that while our presenters are speaking today, that all attendees please keep their microphones on mute and turn off their videos. There'll be opportunities later in the session to unmute and to see everyone, but while the presentations are occurring, please limit your questions and comments to the chat, which would be most appreciated. I would like to start off today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm meeting today. I'm on the land of Gorigal people of part of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal people, elders, both past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal people present today. I would also like to acknowledge that today is an important day for those that are part of the stolen generation. Today is National Sorry Day, and I think the impact on the stolen generations, on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and the acknowledgement of today is very important. But I think the impact on the stolen generation was very much spoken about in our Welcome to Country at the beginning of the Incubator events by Brendan, for those that were here on Tuesday when that occurred. Brendan really spoke from the heart about the impact that he had and that had on his family. So acknowledging importantly that today is National Sorry Day, and also acknowledging the work that we want to continue to do with Aboriginal carers and people across New South Wales. So thank you. So today, as people would know if they've been at other elements of the session before, the Carer Knowledge Exchange is a really important partnership between Carers New South Wales, the Institute for Public Policy and Governance at UTS, and it's proudly funded by the New South Wales Government. As we've spoken about, and what is evident from all of the attendees today, it brings together carers, researchers, policymakers and practitioners to share their knowledge and to learn from each other. So over the past 2 days, we've heard a number of different perspectives on carers' experiences of transitions. And I think from the papers and presentations that we've had, we've seen that can be quite different and challenging and present its own challenges for people, but also that it's not an easy transition from one thing to the other. And just because caring ends or seemingly ends, the impacts don't. And I think we've heard from all of our speakers in the discussion about those different transitions and different work that we can build on. So today we're going to bring this week's event to a close by launching the new Carer Knowledge Exchange digital platform, and by hearing about some of the existing knowledge exchange initiatives that can help inform and inspire this important project. So to open this session, we're going to hear a pre-recorded message from the Honourable Natasha McLaren-Jones, Minister for Families and Communities and for Disability Services, who will officially launch the new Carer Knowledge Exchange digital platform.
Thank you, Eleanor, for the opportunity to speak to you all today. As a former registered nurse, I've seen firsthand the valuable role collaborations in research and development can make. And I'm thrilled to announce the launch of the Carer Knowledge Exchange digital platform today. It is a timely step forward, bringing together carers, researchers, students, professionals and service providers to share knowledge and learn from each other, with the vital aim of improving outcomes for carers by connecting research to practice. This digital platform will provide many opportunities to share your knowledge and learn from each other. Delivered by Carers New South Wales and the Institute of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Technology, Sydney, and proudly funded by the New South Wales Government, the Carer Knowledge Exchange is a great example of what can be achieved through partnership. I want to thank Carers New South Wales for their commitment to the Carer Knowledge Exchange program. I also want to acknowledge that as the peak organisation representing carers, Carers New South Wales has worked closely with the New South Wales Government as an invaluable partner in helping to implement elements of the New South Wales Carers Strategy. Events such as the Carers Exchange's inaugural Research Incubator offers a powerful opportunity for carers, researchers and service providers alike to learn from each other and take research into practice. I look forward to learning what comes of the presentations and discussions over the course of this new initiative. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. So there we go. So thank you to the Minister for launching the platform. So I'm now going to hand over to Sarah Judd-Lamb, who's the Executive Manager of Policy Research and Projects at Carers New South Wales, who's going to give us a little bit of a walk through the digital platform and demonstrate some of its key features. As most of these projects, there's still a few tweaks that we're going to be working through over the next few weeks, but this is our initial look at the platform. So I'll hand over to Sarah.
Once I unmute, thanks very much, Elena. So hopefully everyone can see that homepage. Is that showing up okay? Now, as Elena said, there's still just a few final tweaks happening here, and this is not public yet on our domain, but we will update everybody that's attended this week and that's on the Carer Knowledge Exchange mailing list when it's ready to go and fully ready to interact with. But as the Executive Manager of Policy Research and Projects at Carers New South Wales, who has been working with the Carer Knowledge Exchange team across our organisation and IPPG, I wanted to just give you a run through of some of the key features and a bit of a taste of what this will look like. And we're really excited to show you this, and we will be also seeking people's feedback in the coming days and weeks to get this really just working perfectly for everybody. It's a resource we want carers, researchers, policymakers and practitioners to all be able to use, and really a central place where all the great stuff that's happening already in the carer research and practice world can be together in one place so that everybody can benefit. So we have a number of different things on this platform that I wanted to highlight. So very quickly, I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of the homepage. Still finalising some of the look of this, but as you can see, we've got our Carer Knowledge Exchange logo and branding. We've got a menu with all the things on offer. I'm not going to take you through everything in detail today, but one thing to point you to that will also you'll hear more about in the next session. We have an about page, which talks about the Carer Knowledge Exchange project, about the purpose of the digital platform. So we will make sure that's available to everybody to read so that they understand the resource. And we also have some frequently asked questions, which we'll continue to add to as the platform gets used. And this tells you all about the project, how we define carers, what the different features of the platform are and how to use them. And we're hoping to build that out with a lot more instructional guides as we go. So the key things I wanted to show you today are the purpose of the digital platform, which is a key part of the Carer Knowledge Exchange project. And the two key elements of that are the opportunity to connect with different events and opportunities with the audiences that are present today, and also the research library, which is a really key part of this platform as well. So just very briefly, one key way that you can get involved is to sign up. And this form is not live right yet, but we'll give you the link to the current website later today where you can sign up for updates if you haven't already. What we will have continuing is the same opportunity to sign up to our mailing list so that you can receive updates and opportunities around the Carer Knowledge Exchange. We also will have a Get Involved page, which you can see here. There's a sign up form, and on here, we're going to list all of the upcoming events for the Carer Knowledge Exchange. So the next Incubator, because these will be happening annually. We also have quarterly webinars, and we'll have communities of practice and other events featured here. So you can see there's nothing showing yet. That's because those are still being planned. But one thing I will draw your attention to, we're going to have an area for recorded events. So currently we've been hosting the recorded events for the Carer Knowledge Exchange on the Carers New South Wales YouTube channel. What we will be doing into the future, in addition to that, is ensuring that all of the Carer Knowledge Exchange events are recorded and shared here so that anyone can dip in and go back to these over time. That will include this week's sessions, and it will also include the outcomes of the sessions this week, which will have we're going to do a bit of a visual display of some of the outcomes. So all of that will be available, and we'll direct you to here once that's ready. There will be a discussion board, which is again not quite ready yet, but a way to be able to interact with everybody that's using this platform. So a number of different ways to connect and collaborate through the platform. And then the other main thing I wanted to show you is the research library. So this is something that the advisory groups for the project have been working very hard on, and we will hear a little bit more about in the next session. This is really designed to be a central place that carers, researchers, policymakers and practitioners can find all of the recent, reliable, useful research on carers. And when we talk about research, we're defining that broadly. So this is a place for anyone that's really collecting information about carers in a systematic way, whether that's through formal sort of university-led research or through practice or evaluation in a service setting or through collecting lived experience. Any kinds of resources and publications that would be useful to share that knowledge with everybody working with carers to improve the evidence base. This is where that's going to go. And so we're in the process at the moment of putting a whole lot of existing publications and resources that we're aware of in that so that it can kick off. But it will also have a function that all of you and users can add their own research in or suggest research they're aware of that's not already included. So that form is not quite ready yet, but we will let everybody know when that's ready. We have lots of instructions on the site which sort of detail what that process is, what kinds of things will be included. But for now, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an example of the types of things. So we've just got a couple of things in there that are quite different resources to show you. So you'll be able to, when this is fully populated, you'll be able to search for a resource by a number of different things. Whether that's year of publication or author, keyword. Also be able to browse by theme. So we've, with the advisory groups, developed some common themes to group together different resources and publications about carers and caring. And so what I've just done is put a couple of ones in here so I can show you how they'll appear and the kinds of things that will be included. So if we go to the recognition and inclusion theme, we have here a result from actually a New South Wales Government, Department of Communities and Justice publication that was a journal article back in 2017. And so for every publication that's entered, we'll have a summary page come up like this that has the key information about the publication or the resource. It will allow you to go directly to that resource or publication, and it will have some summary points really about what carers might find beneficial from the publication and also what policymakers and practitioners can learn. So again, this is still just being finessed, but every publication or resource included in the library will have this so that people can quickly gather what the key findings are and what is of most relevant to them. If I go back to the results and I go to another theme, I'm just going to try going now to income and paid work. So if I'm searching this theme, I will find that we've got actually a UTS, a IPPG publication from the Centre for Carers Research in 2020. And this is a bit of a different publication. It's not a journal article, but what it is a report on an activity that was undertaken by the Centre for Carers Research and the Centre for Social Inclusion. And it was based on a review of some policies and practice and a survey within UTS. And so here again, I can download that publication and I can see a summary and some details about that will be more fully populated. And finally, as another example, we also have put in something around specific groups of carers. So the publication that's in here as an example is a toolkit that Carers New South Wales published, which was based on research and then looked really at practical tips for engaging with culturally diverse carers. And so again, here, this would be detailed. It'll say what it is and some key actions or applications for different groups of people. So that's really I guess, just a very brief run through of the key features of the platform. And I just wanted to end by coming to back to this about page, because I think a key question that will come up is, who is this for? How can I benefit as a carer, as a researcher, as a policymaker or practitioner? And really, we've designed this platform in collaboration with the advisory groups for this project in a lot of detail, because we want it to be accessible to all of these audiences, but we also want it to be something that is a really good go-to library of current, really good quality research. And so we've thought through how different groups might want to use it and benefit from it. And we will be seeking this network's feedback about that over time to make sure that we get it so it's accessible and it's attractive and it's useful to all of you. So that's also detailed on the site, but we anticipate that carers might want to use it to inform their own caring and advocacy. We anticipate that researchers might want to use it to build on research and collaborate with others, and that policymakers and practitioners might want to draw on these publications for their own service design, grant applications, those kinds of things. So we're thinking around a number of uses, but we really do welcome your feedback over time. And so that's the main features that I wanted to showcase today. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions after the first lot of presentations today, but I hope that that's been interesting. And please do sign up to the website that's in the chat to get updates about this project, and we will also update all attendees of sessions this week. So thank you, and back to you, Elena.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. It's so good to see all of this, now come together, and I know all the hard work that Sarah and the team, both here and at UTS and IPPG, have put in to get us to this point. So it's great to have this now happening. So now I'm going to hand over to my co-chair today, to Carol Mills, the Director of the Institute for Public Policy and Governance at UTS. And Carol will introduce our guest speakers for this morning's sessions. So thank you, everyone.
Hi, I've just got a minor tech detail problem. So Elena, can you hang in there for a minute and just introduce the session while I just sort this out? Or something just wrong in the last 5 minutes typically.
That's all right, no problem. So our first speaker today, sorry, I'll just catch up where I am.
Yeah, sorry, my fault. Apologies, everyone.
That's all right.
News from your Tech University.
Yep. The digital platform and the broader Care Knowledge Exchange platform have been developed with extensive input and expertise from the Research Advisory Group, which is made up of 12 researchers from both academic and not-for-profit contexts, and the Carer Advisory Group, which is made up of 5 carer representatives with an interest in research. Both of these groups were formed in August 2021, and they've really played a very, very key role in the development of the project to date. So we're going to hear from different members of those groups. So our first speaker is Kylie Miskovsky from Dementia Australia. Kylie's on the Research Advisory Group. Kylie's the General Manager of Policy and Advocacy at Dementia Australia. She's been with the organisation for 11 years and has worked in various research and policy roles in that time. Kylie has an honours degree in social science and is a passionate advocate for people living with dementia, their families and carers. She's a member of the Research Advisory Group for the Care Knowledge Exchange. So I'll welcome Kylie to speak to us today and talk about her experience. Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, Elena. Good morning, everyone. So I'm joining you today from my home in Oatley in southern Sydney, and I'd like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As Elena said, I'm Kylie Miskovsky and I'm the General Manager of Policy and Advocacy at Dementia Australia. Dementia Australia is the peak body for the almost 500,000 people living with dementia and their families and carers. The role of my team in Dementia Australia is broadly to undertake the systemic advocacy for the organisation, and we do that via proactive policy activities such as developing organisational position statements and discussion papers, and then much more reactive policy work such as preparing submissions to government inquiries and responding to emerging policy issues that are impacting people living with dementia and carers. In all of our work, we consult with people with lived experience to ensure that we respond to their needs and that the experiences of people impacted by dementia are elevated to government and to key aged care, disability and healthcare stakeholders. So I joined Dementia Australia, or what was then Alzheimer's Australia New South Wales, in 2011 to work on a research project about the service and support requirements of people living with younger onset dementia. And that was conducted in collaboration with researchers from the University of New South Wales. I thought that would be a short-term role for me, but I stuck around. And since then, I've held a range of research and policy roles at Alzheimer's Australia and now Dementia Australia, in between having a couple of years off to have my 2 children. Prior to joining Dementia Australia, I worked at Macquarie University as a researcher, a sociology tutor and course convener, and as a PhD candidate. And then my life and my career direction changed. So like many others involved with the Care and Knowledge Exchange, I wear multiple hats. So while professionally I speak from a policy or a practitioner perspective, who also had a foot in the academic world for a time, I also wear a carer, or now a former carer hat. From his late diagnosis of younger onset dementia in 2009, through to his death in 2016, I was the primary carer for my father. He lived with younger onset dementia, and undoubtedly my personal and my working life has been defined by this carer experience. When Carers New South Wales invited me to join the research advisory group for the Care and Knowledge Exchange, my answer was a resounding yes. The Care and Knowledge Exchange seeks to do what I think is so important: breaking down barriers to research access and knowledge translation. All throughout my career, both as an academic and as a researcher and policy practitioner for a peak advocacy organisation, I've always been passionate about ensuring research, both the process and the findings, are accessible. I've had a strong focus on knowledge translation and getting the findings of research into practice, or into the hands of those who can put it into practice. From the perspective of someone working in policy in the not-for-profit space, it's essential that our work is evidence-based and research-informed. But as many of you would know, getting access to research findings can often be difficult, as academic research has traditionally largely been held behind paywalls, and not-for-profit organisations rarely have access to the databases. So to have plain English summaries of key carer research available on the Care and Knowledge Exchange digital platform is fantastic. And I'm especially appreciative of researchers identifying why their research is important to carers and to policymakers. I also very much appreciate the Care and Knowledge Exchange team and also the advisory group's recognition that knowledge isn't just academic research, and that there is much to be gained from community-based research conducted by people like myself in the not-for-profit and policy space, so-called grey literature. And through events such as this, research is made even more accessible, not only to policymakers and practitioners, but to carers and other people with lived experience. The opportunity to share knowledge about carers and learn from each other is so very valuable. As a not-for-profit researcher or policy practitioner representative in the Care and Knowledge Exchange Research Advisory Group, I see my role as ensuring that the research, knowledge, policy and information needs of researchers, policy staff and practitioners in the not-for-profit organisations are captured and responded to in the digital platform, the research library and events such as this. I really look forward to seeing the possibilities of the Care and Knowledge Exchange realised and seeing improved practice and outcomes for carers as a result. I want to extend my congratulations to the team at Carers New South Wales and to the Institute of Public Policy and Governance at UTS on this initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Kylie. I will hand over to Carol now, I think, who's
Sorted,
all sorted. So I
all
will hand
sorted.
over
Thank
to
you.
Carol now to introduce the rest of the speakers this morning. Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks for capably and smoothly filling in there, Elena. Apologies again for our technology. I would like to introduce our second speaker this morning, Giselle Galleo of the University of Notre Dame. Giselle is a Senior Research Fellow in Transactional Research at the School of Medicine, and she is a clinical and health services researcher with skills and experience in knowledge translation and the use of mixed methods in research. Her research and teaching focus is on the experience of marginalised populations. She's also a member of the Research Advisory Group for the Knowledge Exchange. So thank you, Giselle.
Thank you very much, Carol. So much of what I had to say has actually been given to you by Carol. But I'll just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which I am based today. I am in the Galleo land of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to all those past and present and emerging, and extend their respect to any Aboriginal people present with us today. So as Carol mentioned, I am a clinician. I'm a qualitative and mixed methods researcher. A lot of my work is based on arts-based knowledge translation. And that has to do with the fact that most of my work is with people with disability and from cultural and linguistic diverse background. I am also from a CALD background, and I also care for a parent who lives overseas, which raises some interesting questions in terms of who identifies as a carer and what is caring in different cultures. I became a member of the Carer Knowledge Exchange Research Advisory Group. In August, I saw this expression of interest, and I jumped straight into it because it was a wonderful opportunity. I basically saw it as an opportunity to also learn. As I am in health, we tend to be very insular, and we kind of believe that we are the holders of some truth, but we don't mix in the playground. So I think this is also an opportunity for me to have some interprofessional education as well. But more importantly, the Carer Knowledge Exchange provides the opportunity to have access to information in a language that was accessible, friendly, easy to use, but more importantly, also for different stakeholders. And I hope that in the future, it's going to be a place to meet and support co-design with carers, and also have as a researcher, has a potential impact beyond our usual peer-reviewed publication that only other researchers have access to, but it's not very accessible to other people, and it's not sometimes very palatable. So I guess I'm pitching to reverse, and I'm just kind of saying what Kylie said before, why we need this, because obviously we need to facilitate the translation of research findings into better practice, and ultimately to guide policy making and to improve the outcomes of carers. As I said before, I think it's a great opportunity to translate carer evidence-based and to be part of a community of practice and work alongside carers, policymakers, advocacy, service providers, and people who are actually in the ground and have the lived experience. So I think I am grateful, and I think this is a great learning opportunity as well for me to be part of the Carer Knowledge Exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Giselle. I'd like to now introduce our third speaker, who is also a member of our advisory group, Maureen Flynn. Maureen is the carer of 2 family members on NDIS. She works in community care, case management, policy and sector support across disability, aged care, mental health and carer support for several years. In 2021, she career changed to work in a public library and is currently studying for her Masters of Information Studies. Maureen is, as I said, a member of the Carer Advisory Group for the Knowledge Exchange. Thank you very much, Maureen.
Thank you, Carol. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm on Sutherland Shire land today, which is Dharawal people territory. And I'd like to pay my respects to any elders with us today, past, present and emerging. So as Carol mentioned, I'm on the Carer Advisory Group within the Carer Knowledge Exchange program. And I'd like to talk today about why I'm on the Carer Advisory, what I feel I contribute to that Carer Advisory Group, but also I want to talk about why I chose to take part in the advisory group and why carers should participate, or what they can get out of participating in the Carer Knowledge Exchange project. So first, to talk about why I chose to be on the Carer Advisory and what I feel I can contribute. So as Carol mentioned, I'm a carer. 2 of my family members are on NDIS. So my mother has very complex autoimmune diseases that have led to degenerative disability, and she's classified as a complex NDIS participant, and my brother is autistic. And long before I had anything to do with community care in my career, I was involved with Carers New South Wales through their Young Carers program as a young carer, participating in young carer camps and counselling sessions, both group and individual, and various other events that were targeted towards young carers. So I hope to bring some of that personal experience to the Carer Knowledge Exchange through the Carer Advisory. Then, as Carol also mentioned, I've worked in policy and community care for a number of years, across case management, as a support worker, as a volunteer, working with autistic children, but also as a project manager and consultant. And I've worked with Carers New South Wales across a number of projects, both as a consultant and as a carer representative. And then in 2021, I decided to career change into working with public libraries and working with the information sector more generally. And as part of that, I started studying my master's. And I guess for me, the Carer Knowledge Exchange is an opportunity for me to apply my information management skills to a project that matters a lot for carers. People don't always see, I think, how public libraries can connect to community care and can connect to users such as carers and people with disability, people frail from age, people with mental health needs. There's actually a lot more scope than people think, especially now that libraries are moving more towards becoming community hubs and places that include everyone in the community. And I'm happy to talk more about that later. I guess in terms of why I wanted to take part in the advisory group in particular, like I've mentioned, I've participated in various projects with Carers New South Wales, but also been an end user of Carers New South Wales supports from a young age. And I know and trust them now to get the job done and get the job done well. And so I know that they are a not-for-profit that does value carers, and that they have a collegial and collaborative approach that the knowledge exchange needs to have to succeed. And the other reason why I'm really keen to be involved in this project and I'm really enjoying my time as an advisory group member is because I've always been interested in best practice across community care, but especially within carer support. As somebody that has been a young carer and has continued on to be a carer growing up into adulthood, I've seen that there's often times where research doesn't link to practice and carers are the ones who miss out. So linking research data and analysis to carer voice is actually really important, especially when that hasn't always been happening. And like in the disability space where there's a debate right now around nothing happening without us, I feel the same should happen with carers. Nothing about us without us should be the way we do research and projects moving forward. So in terms of why carers should participate in the Carer Knowledge Exchange, or what might benefit carers participating in the Carer Knowledge Exchange, there's a couple of really valuable things that I can see. So the first that I feel for myself, but also could be relevant to other carers, is advocacy potential. So there's advocacy potential for carers individually, but also as a group or as a cohort that is often disadvantaged in our society. So for individual carers, I feel that the Carer Knowledge Exchange provides an opportunity to find quality research and use that for our own advocacy needs. So for example, we know that NDIS is very focused on how it allocates funding around reasonable and necessary supports. So having access to research that's publicly available in easy to understand research language is a great way for carers to potentially be able to advocate for further funding or to show that a support is reasonable and necessary. It can also be used to show providers how a support should be delivered to the person that we are caring for and to show how our own needs can be met, or to even talk to GPs and the health community or sector about what our needs are and what the needs of the person we care for are. For example, when somebody is going to hospital. And at a wider level, participating in the exchange means providers and researchers can't keep doing work without us carers. It also means that carers can start directing where research is headed. So for example, there is not enough research at the moment on chronic illness and in particular autoimmune diseases. And that has made my experience as a carer challenging sometimes as the research just isn't there. And so by being part of this knowledge exchange, perhaps I can be communicating and connecting with researchers who might be interested in taking up that research work further. I also feel that there's an experience or a career aspect that could be of value to carers. So involvement in this knowledge exchange is not just about immediate research outcomes, but it's also about collaborating, events, networking, learning from others. And that can lead, as we know, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know in industry, and that can lead to volunteer and employment opportunities, which is a way to put our carer skills into a format that others can understand and attribute employment value to. There's also networking, like I've said, with other like-minded people. So whether they're researchers, providers, or carers, these are people that might be able to support me and other carers on the caring journey and help us to find the correct knowledge and information we need when we need it. And it's a way to improve our own knowledge about what affects us as carers. It's an opportunity to learn more, to get new ideas, to question ourselves as carers and to grow as carers, which I think is really important, especially when we might be caring for people with complex needs. So with all of that said, I'm really excited to be part of this particular project as part of the Care Advisory Group. And I'm really excited to see what happens moving forward as the project continues. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maureen. That was really helpful to us in terms of describing, I guess, a lot of the areas of focus and the priorities we want to put to the program. We've heard now from 3 members of our advisory group. Each has come from a slightly different perspective and a slightly different background, but I think demonstrates the way in which we really want this to be an opportunity to meld priority research based around the needs of carers, evidence-based research that helps not just researchers and academics, but actually helps, as Maureen just said, carers in their own life, both in terms of methods of caring, but also the sorts of things that they can advocate for and an understanding of good practice. We want the exchange information to be really accessible. Again, one of the real drivers that perhaps when Elena and I first discussed this was, how do we make a difference? There's a lot of research out there, there's a lot of work being done, but not always easily accessible to people. We didn't want to just establish a passive library where people had to search for things. We really wanted to create something that helped do that translation in a really practical, useful way for researchers to understand what else is going on, what their peers are focused on, but also what carers need. And we wanted something that carers felt absolutely engaged with. We didn't want it to be seen as an academic thing that they had to then enter the world of academia to reach. So that's part of our reason for having literature in a raft of forms and having something such as the platform that Sarah's run us through, so that everyone is able to access this information and to influence what is collected in different ways. So thank you, each of you, for that introduction to our, I guess, our purpose and current priorities and directions. We've got a few minutes before we have a brief break to take any questions for either the panelists or Elena and myself on either the platform or the wider role that we're trying to achieve through the platform. So if you do have a question, we've still got a screen share, so I'm not sure if I can see everyone. Perhaps put your hand up if you can, or if you can type into the chat, we will take any questions or comments, of course. I think most of the comments that I've got in front of me are about congratulating the speakers on their contributions. So perhaps they were so comprehensive, we don't have much more to ask of them. But I might ask one question myself. I think it was really, I guess, interesting to see about motivation for coming in. And perhaps if I could ask each of the speakers in turn, just 1 or 2 things that would really matter to them as a success measure in 12 months' time. If we were gathering again, what would they like to have really seen as a difference created by the exchange and by, I guess, their participation in the advisory group? So, Carly, can I just start with you?
Oh, that's a good question. Something that Maureen said really stuck out for me in terms of carer involvement in research. So I think if this knowledge exchange, I guess, promotes opportunities for carers or encourages carers to become more involved in research, I think that would be a fantastic thing.
Fantastic, thank you. And Giselle, do you have a view?
I think echo Kylie's comment, but for me, it's that co-creation, co-design, and that it has to be driven by their priorities, right? So for me, that would be a measure of success, but also that there is a change in policy or practice. Obviously, that is a long-term goal, but that would be wonderful, at least that there is some sort of change, whether it's minor or not.
Thanks. And Maureen, you've sort of touched on it, but I guess I'd ask you again, you know, in 12 months' time, what would you think you'd like to see us have changed or be a result of your participation in this exchange?
So there's 2 things that I really am passionate about. So the first thing is I would love to see carers heavily involved in the various projects or heavily involved in being part of the digital platform and saying that it's useful to them in some way and really meaning that. And the second thing is I echo what Giselle just mentioned around practice. I guess one of the issues that's come up across every day of this particular research incubator has been around how do we get research and what carers are saying onto the front line and actually practiced regularly, consistently, every time, not just based on the knowledge of one particular person, but so that everyone across a particular area does the same thing when it comes to carers. I think that's really difficult, but if we can make some headway through this project, I think that would be a really positive outcome.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple of comments and questions in the chat, which I'll just reference for a moment. We have a comment from Sarah that she'd like to answer one of the questions that's come in from Margaret. So Sarah, can I just defer to you for a moment?
Yes, absolutely. So I just saw the question come through from Margaret, and as it's a little bit about the sort of more, I guess, platform side of things. Margaret's question was whether learnings from NDIS related decisions might be included in the platform and the library. So this hopefully will be a bit clearer once the full site is publicly available, but something that the Research Advisory Group in particular and the Carer Advisory Group have worked on extensively is scope. And it's really thought through it hard because we want to be, as Carol mentioned earlier, we want to be broad enough to be inclusive and really innovative around how we look at knowledge and evidence. But we also want to make sure that things are directly relevant to carers and policymakers, practitioners and researchers. And I guess getting that balance right is going to be a challenge and probably a work over time. So what we will include once that research library is up is some submission guidelines that sort of explain that scope. So I guess something that is looking at concretely learnings from collected information about NDIS decisions and how that applies to carers could definitely be in scope as a publication or resource. And I think that's really how we're going to be approaching this. What's going to happen with the research library, it's not just a matter of things being added or put up, but we'll actually go through a review process behind the scenes by the Care and Knowledge Exchange team, informed by the guidelines developed by the Research Advisory Group. So there will be a process by which it will be thought through. Is this relevant to carers? Does it have specific practical application? And is it sort of trustworthy information? So I think provided things meet that criteria, there's a broad scope to have resources included in the library to inform practice.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great. And look, a couple of other comments / questions coming in, which I might also reference, particularly as we're recording this. One is from Carolyn, who has said it'd be very good for research fundings for carers to be in easy to read language and easily accessible. That's absolutely one of our objectives. We talk about research translation, not just in the sense of, publication and making something available in a traditional way, but making sure that it's accessible in a range of formats and a range of methods that people can use, because we really want that research to be translated. We want to see it in practice. And so we will always work hard through the platforms and our other mechanisms to make sure that it's in a way that can be reached by multiple audiences and used by multiple audiences. So thank you for that one. Another comment / question, I guess, from Anne is that that we need some structure to direct the research about carers and then to redirect it in place. Elena, do you want to speak just for a moment about how we really want to make sure that carer-led process occurs as part of the programs?
Yeah, look, I think we want to make sure that carers are involved in everything that we do, and translating that into practice and making sure that we know where those, where those things are taken up and where that change occurs. I think that is the challenge for us about how we're going to know that over time. But certainly we want to make sure that where carers are involved, that they know the outcome of that involvement, but also that they know where I suppose those changes have occurred. So I was just as we were having that discussion, I was thinking probably incubator in year 3. So the third incubator, across the 3 years that we will be having. I think, obviously I haven't consulted with my partners and colleagues here, but, I'm seeing that we would then probably look at some of those key outcomes about where some of the research that we've seen, where we've involved carers, and then what we can see as has been change in practice on the ground, and hopefully showcase some of that as the time goes on over the life of the platform for now, and obviously beyond the 3 years. So, yeah, look, I think it's a work in progress, but certainly carers are key to all of the things that we're doing as part of the work in the platform.
Thanks, Elena. We've had a comment from Jenny, again, comment slash perhaps question for us about how we would incorporate this approach. Jenny's currently involved in research where they're given updates every 3 months, which keeps them up in the loop on the development. And I just, again, perhaps talk a little bit, go back to you, Sarah, for one moment about how we're going to incorporate sort of live research and updates through the platform.
Absolutely, and this has come through as a really strong interest. So the subscription form that I mentioned earlier, which is currently at www.carerknowledgeexchange.com.au, and I think we've got nearly 300 subscribers to that, a mix of all carers, researchers, policymakers and practitioners. That is our main way currently for updating everybody about research opportunities. One thing that we've done in that subscription form is getting an idea from people, not only what kind of hats they're wearing, but also what their key interests are. And one of the interests that we had on that list is actually participating in research. Another one is leading research. We have a whole range of options there, and we're monitoring that closely and using that to determine, I suppose, some of the activities that are happening and the communications. And so we've seen a very strong interest from a lot of the people that have subscribed in being research participants, also in leading or collaborating on research projects. And so for projects that may be, for example, ongoing or started through this initiative or promoted through the network, there definitely will be an opportunity to have updates. And what we've started with, as those on the subscription list will have seen, is we've started with a regular newsletter. That's going to continue, but we also plan to increase some different options there, and certainly are open to suggestions about how best to do that. And we'll be working with our advisory groups about how best to do that. But for updates on research projects, that's definitely something that could be within scope with the research participation opportunities. So I would just encourage that those that are interested in that subscribe, and also get in touch with us via the feedback form on the website when that's up, around any way that we could do that better.
Thanks, Sarah. Therese, who is a researcher at MS Australia, has also commented that she's really looking forward to being able to access the results of the research library, but also, again, probably links into what we've just been talking about, Sarah and Elena, how carers could express an interest in participating in research. Could there be a registry or some mechanism for them to find projects that they may actually become actively involved in themselves? And I have to say, as a research agency, we are always looking for ways to connect with communities. So it could really be a valuable mechanism for a lot of us.
Sarah, do you want to address that? Just because we've, at Carers New South Wales, we do have a newsletter, like an e-news research group that does go out of all kind of research things that are happening where they're calling for participants. But we certainly, I think we'll be linking that to the Carer Knowledge Exchange now that this is up and running. So there's certainly, you know, broad opportunities for that. But Sarah, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So those that are in New South Wales may be familiar with the research community, which kind of already does that on a monthly basis and puts out research opportunities. In fact, it went out yesterday, so some of you may have received it. And that's really for carers that want to participate in research. And so while that's only New South Wales focused at the moment, I think we'll be looking at opportunities to integrate that in some way into the exchange, because we've definitely heard from people outside of New South Wales, especially, that there's often lots of research projects happening, but it can be hard to kind of get all those circulated and promoted to the right people. So again, that's something that's definitely in scope and that we'll look at doing. And because we have a sort of segment of our subscriber list at the moment that we know is interested in that, we've already early on gone to that segment of the list and said, if you're in New South Wales, you can join this. But I think we can go back to that group again in future with sort of next steps around the best way to communicate those opportunities. And they're happy to work with researchers and also other organisations that promote research around coordinating that to make sure that that's centralised and communicated in a useful way.
Thanks, Sarah. There's a few more things in the chat that some of them we'll just make sure we record and provide as information to participants. But a couple of things I just want to highlight for the moment. Melissa has pointed out that the Administrative Appeals Tribunal obviously regularly publishes their decisions regarding NDIS cases. So back to that question that was earlier about how can we understand some of the decision-making criteria. And she's provided a link on the chat for that site. Michael Fine, who's one of our long-term participants and advisors, has also typed in a question, but I might actually ask Michael to speak to that for a moment, if you can unmute yourself, Michael.
If I could, I seem to have mainly typed a lot of typos. I was trying to get that in quickly before the chat went down. One of the things I've been so impressed about working on the Carers Knowledge Exchange is that it is an open project, so that this isn't what we're seeing today on the screen is the beginnings, but this will evolve and develop over time. And one of the questions we confronted on the advisory group is, what is knowledge? And we were confronting it at the very time that we started to see the resistance to a lot of the lockdowns and the measures that were taken in COVID. You know, we could see the sort of, on the one hand, this golden standard of scientific integrity and knowledge. On the other hand, the sort of way in which a lot of sort of ordinary experience, which is also knowledge, people's practical experience is knowledge, is excluded. And so there is a balance as how that works. So over time, I'm sure that the literally the consumer experience, if we might call it that, you know, the sort of practical everyday experience of caregivers will start to come through strongly. At the moment, there's capacity for some of that to be put up and to be thought through and to be incorporated, but there's also a lot of links that haven't been highlighted yet about it. So there are existing, of course, chat groups and various repositories also existing both in Australia and overseas. And that's one of the important features of this. People will find that it's actually just the beginning of a search for information, but as a way for contributing, I think this is going to really develop over time. And that'll be extremely important, because a lot of the studies, for example, done in the United States, very interesting in sort of general scientific issues, but it doesn't tell you much about applying to your local services in a part of Sydney or Western New South Wales or West Australia or wherever you are in Australia. So that local side will also come through. And I think this openness is really important.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely important points to make. A couple of other comments just before we close for a brief break between now and the next session. I think there's a comment here about sorry, I've just lost it because there's lots of comments and they're scrolling through my screen, but the Autism Cooperative Research Centre, Natalie has pointed out, is also a useful model, and certainly something that we've looked at previously and will look at again in terms of how it uses the practical implications and outcomes from research to actually directly assist people. We've also had a comment / question, which I'm sorry, I've just completely lost my questions, but I will try and paraphrase it. So I apologise, I can't see who it was from, but it was relating to how we actually also hear the voice of people who are being cared for themselves, and about their awareness of the pressures and expectations that are placed on their carers, and how we just don't look at it from a single lens. I don't know if anyone, particularly some of our panelists who have been carers for a long time, feel about the need to ensure that we hear from the people for whom they have cared.
I'm happy to say something about that if you like. So that's a valid point, but I also think it really depends on the context of the research itself and what that research is trying to achieve, because there's some areas where carer voice has not been heard, and there's some areas where it might be difficult for carers and the person that is being cared for to both have their points of view heard within a research project without causing issues because of sensitivity around that burden question. So I think it's contextual. I think researchers, if they're good researchers, would be aware of these issues, and they would be aware of the debate that's happening around including people with disability, the end user, the person from age, person with mental illness, in these sorts of discussions around their care and around how their feelings about the caring role, person they care for, impacts on them. But I think that's something that researchers just need to be aware of and deal with contextually.
Thanks, Maureen. And I might just finish with one last comment / question. Jerry, who is a carer, has said, you know, concerns from carers can be about, are they seen to be rocking the boat, or concerned if they speak the truth that won't be well received. and ask, are there some ways that they can make their comments anonymously or participate in a way that doesn't give them concern about their own privacy? Again, I don't know if anyone in particular would like to answer that. I would simply acknowledge that that's a really important consideration. If we are to really have open dialogue and really have practical solutions, we need to ensure that everybody has a voice and no one feels that they're prohibited from speaking up. So it's certainly something that we will consider and make sure we've built into our arrangements.
If I could also add a quick plug there, it's a very good segue to promote our upcoming 2022 National Carer Survey, which launches on the 1st of June next week and is an anonymous opportunity to provide your experiences and share your knowledge. So perhaps if our admin team can pop a little link in the chat, that would be great. But that's one opportunity, and we'll look at other opportunities as well, as Carol said.
Thank you, Sarah. That brings us to the end of this first session. According to the schedule, we've been generously allowed 5 minutes to stand up and just sort of shake our legs and feel a little bit alive from the Zoom meeting. I might be very brave and slightly anarchistic and say we'll make that 10 minutes, just so that people can actually get up and move around if they need to. So we will be back at 11:40. Please, given I'm giving you an extra 5 minutes, be punctual so I don't get into further trouble. And the second session, we're going to talk about the research incubator. So thank you everyone for your terrific presentations. Thank you for the participation in the chat, and look forward to seeing you again in a few minutes.